All right, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk about 5 absolute must-have tools for your woodworking journey. So we're actually going to break this up into several tiers. The first tier is going to be stuff you already kind of need just to begin, which is going to be your tape measure, your pencil, your squares, just simple hand tools like that. But once you get past that, you're starting to get into your more expensive tools, your $60, your $80, $100, $200, $300 tools. And when you get into there, you got to be careful about what you're getting. The very first thing you're going to need to buy is a drill. Now, I started with these Ryobis, back in 2016, I started running Ryobis. I was just getting into construction, building houses, and these were affordable at the time, so I started with the Ryobi. Now, I actually run Bowers now. If you don't know Bowers, they're the middle tier Harbor Freight brand. Let me tell you why I use these. With Bauer, their tools are cheap, very affordable, 20 volts. They work really well. I have used this Bauer one right here. I've had this since 2020 now. I've dropped it off a few roofs. That thing is an absolute machine, and I actually upgraded it and got a brand new version of it. But I still like that old one a lot more, and I still find myself using that old one. But the thing about Bauer is you'll see I have a lot of Bauer tools. And what you can do there is they have a return policy, which the way I look at it is kind of a renewal policy. So if you go buy a tool, let's say you get the drill for $60. They do a protection plan on that where you can do 2 years for like $13, I think it was on that drill. And after 2 years, broken or still working, you can go and return it. And if they're no longer selling that drill, they'll give you the newest upgraded model of that drill. So what I do is you buy the tool, and every 2 years you go back and you get brand new Bauer drills, impacts, oscillators, all of that stuff. I run Bauer. They work really well for me. They're super affordable. And if it's not a tool that cuts, I don't like spending a whole bunch of money on it if I don't have to. With that being said, you're going to want to start on a drill and a driver right away. You can get away with just doing the drill, but a lot of times you're going to get a better deal with a battery if you get a combo kit, a drill and driver combo kit. And then we're going to move on to our next tool, the circular saw. Now I have 2 different styles of circular saws. I have a track saw and I have your standard circular saw. I started with this. You don't need one of these. These are upwards of $1,000. This one probably going for like 80 bucks right now at Home Depot. This was the first circular saw I started with. You're gonna have a couple options for circular saws. You're gonna have corded and cordless. For a circular saw, I would really recommend you go corded. I know it's a hassle to move the wires around all the time, but you are gonna absolutely burn through batteries if you're using a battery-powered circular saw. The batteries just can't keep up with how much cutting, especially if you're doing some ripping or anything like that, or you're really gonna need a corded circular saw. There's a few different sizes, but what I'd recommend you go with is gonna be a 7 1/4 blade. These things don't always come with the best blades in them. When it comes to blades, they can get very pricey, right? So I recommend you go with these Bauer blades. This one's actually for my table saw, but they make the same size for the circular saw. These blades, they're really nice. I've gotten really smooth cuts out of them. They stay sharp for a long time, and they're pretty affordable. So if you guys have a better one you like that's around the same price, let me know in the comments. But this is the one that I've had the best luck with as far as price and usability. The track saws are very nice, but you do not need it as a beginner. I got it because I started getting into some projects where it was going to be super beneficial to me to have one of these. Getting perfect precision with these isn't always the easiest thing. If you're trying to cut a 4-foot 2x4, into a 3 5/8 length, it's hard to get that actually perfectly square with a circular saw. So that brings us into our next tool, which is going to be a table saw. When it comes to beginner table saws, I could not highly recommend any better table saw than this Skill one right here. If you check out John Malecki or 731 Woodworks, all those guys, they recommend this one, and I bought in when they started recommending it because this saw has been absolutely fantastic. The first table saw I ever actually started on was a Warrior table saw from Harbor Freight, and it worked, but it didn't work really well. The rack and pinion, you're going to be able to move your fence over left and right like this. It has measuring tape right here that I've found to be super accurate, and you can even adjust it a little bit if it's a little bit off. But this fence has been the absolute best fence I've used on any job site table saw before. And it actually extends on its main frame out to 22 inches right there. But what you can do is actually flip this over so your wood is something to ride on. And you can unbuckle this, and instead of mounting it to this bolt, you can mount it to this bolt, and it actually extends it out from 22 to 26 inches. So you get 4 extra inches of space there because of that. So you have 2 styles of table saws, which is going to be your job site saw, and you're also going to have your cabinet style saw, which a lot of times they look like those big saw stop ones you see a lot of the YouTubers use. Those things cost upwards of, you know, $4,000 to get. So I'm in no hurry to get one of those. This table saw right here has worked out for everything I've needed it to do. But yeah, that's your table saw. That's going to be one of the most important things you can buy. And make sure you get these things squared away. Learn how to use all of your tools, because a lot of them have micro adjustments which make a huge difference on how your project turns out. That you need to know how to use those micro adjusters. So really look into your tools when you get them, make sure you know how to use them. All right, the next tool you're gonna need is clamps. Now when it comes to clamps, you don't need the best Bessie clamps, you know, the straight parallel clamps. You don't need those. They're nice to have, I don't have them, but you do need some. And kind of the way I've done it is just slowly collecting them over time. Because I've had a hard time wanting to go to, you know, Home Depot and spend $600 on, you know, 8 clamps. To me, I'd rather just pick them up as I go. Whenever they're running a good deal on clamps, I'll pick up a pack of them. If you're getting some of these smaller ones, they're pretty cheap. You can get them in like a 10 pack for, you know, 40 bucks or something. But you don't have to start with the most expensive ones. Start with some of the cheaper ones that you can find at Harbor Freight or at Menards or Home Depot. Get some of the cheaper ones and start there, and eventually you can start to get some of those more expensive ones. But what I would recommend is you start with these F-style ones. So these are super affordable. I think these were like $11 at Harbor Freight back when I got them a few years ago. They're super affordable. They work super well. These tool shop ones I got at Menards. They were in a 4-pack for like 20 bucks. Super good deal. They've worked really well because these long ones can still do the same things the shorter can. I remember I've done some glue ups before I had a lot of these short ones, where I'm just gluing up something tiny, but I got this big old 40-inch clamp attached to this little tiny piece, and it worked. It works just fine. Now, if I had started with these and I needed to glue something up that was 14 inches, I can't do it with this little 6-inch one, but you can with the longer ones. So start getting a couple long ones, and then you can start working your way into the shorter one. One of my favorite ones I've actually ran into are these types. I don't know exactly what they're called. So these worked really well. I got these Wen ones on Amazon, again, for super cheap. But clamps are super important. You do need them, but don't go and break the bank on them buying Bessie parallel clamps right away. You know, you don't need a 6-inch Bessie parallel clamp that costs you $80. You really don't. Look at the end caps and wait till you can find some good deals on these, and then they'll slowly accumulate over time. You know, I've never bought more than 1 pack of clamps at once, but now I can sit here, I have a whole bunch of clamps. It's just because I've slowly bought them over time. For the 5th tool, I was having a really hard time deciding what to pick for this one, so I'm kind of just going to mention both of them. Tool number 4.5 is going to be a planer. Now, planers are super nice. I got this lunchbox planer over at Lowe's. Quick funny story behind it. I had bought it brand new at Lowe's, right? And I got home and opened it up, and there was a bunch of sawdust in the box. So I was like, okay, this thing's clearly been used before. I didn't get a discount or anything on it, so I don't know why they sold me a used tool. So I brought it back over to Lowe's, and the story was, it ended up being the guy returned it saying it was brand new, unopened, so they put it back in their inventory on the shelf to sell, and I bought it, brought it home. Obviously it was used, so I brought it back to Lowe's. They were super cool about it. They gave me a brand new one. This one's really nice. A lot of times you're gonna hear helical head. I don't have a helical head on this. Super expensive, and with just a little bit more sanding in the end, you can actually kind of get the same result that a helical head's gonna give you. But the planer's main purpose is thicknessing. It's taking a 2-inch board and bringing it down to whatever thickness you want. You know, 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, 1.75 inches, 5/8, whatever. They're not necessarily a flattener. There are some sleds you can build where you can actually flatten wood boards with this, but the main purpose of this is actually just to decrease the thickness on a board. But you don't absolutely need one of these. In the beginning, you're gonna do a lot of projects with pine. And I recommend you get pine because super cheap, super easy to work with, not hard on your tools. And in the beginning, you're not gonna be able to make masterpieces. You're gonna have to start somewhere. Start with pine projects. Build something out of a 2x4, build a nightstand, whatever. and start figuring out how to be a good woodworker, because it does take a lot of practice. It's not as easy as it might seem. It takes a lot of practice to get good using these tools. So the other part of number 5 was a miter saw. I absolutely love having a miter saw. You're going to be way more efficient using a miter saw than you are a circular saw to cut boards, but you don't absolutely need it, especially if you're a beginner. You don't absolutely need it, but I would make it one of the first few tools you buy. I use the absolute crap out of mine, and if you can learn how to micro adjust your miter saw, you're actually going to get really good clean cuts with this thing. And a lot of people say just to use a crosscut sled on a table saw so you can get better cuts, and that does work. That is typically the better way to do it, but you can do it on a miter saw if you just really adjust it and you don't put too much sideways pressure when you're pushing down to make your cut with your miter. You can get really clean cuts. I have a Delta miter saw, and it's got these robot arms on it. The big reason behind that was, if you guys remember, I was originally working in a storage unit, so I didn't have a huge amount of space to be working in. So I wanted to get a miter saw that I could put as close to the wall as possible. And those big sliding miter saws, the issue with those is you have 13 or so inches of bars behind it. So your saw has to actually sit pretty far off the wall. So that was the big reason why I went with this Delta one, is because I like the robot arms for it. They work super nice. They're super smooth, clean cuts. But you don't have to go with this expensive Delta one. You can get a cheaper one. Originally, I actually used to use a corded Ryobi one, and I used that for years. It worked super well for me, but eventually the money started coming in to where I was able to get something like this, where I can cut a little bit deeper and not use so much floor space. So those are some of the best tools to use. Just give an honorable mention to be an air compressor, because you're going to use a lot of brad nails to put things together, especially in your early days. And electric ones are nice, but if you're shooting a lot of those, they are super heavy and they don't shoot as fast. And sometimes they're bigger, so it's hard to get them into tight to fit places. A Boss Stitch one, I think it was like $200 for a pancake compressor that came with an 18 gauge, a 20 gauge, and a stapler. And a hose, and that was a super good kit. Worked really well for me. I have used it for years and still use the same air compressor. You don't need a big 100-gallon air compressor to begin with. If you get a pancake, it's going to work just fine and get pretty much everything you need done. These are my beginner woodworking tools. These are absolute must-haves that get you going and get you started with your woodworking journey. Now, if you get some of this stuff, you can start here and grow your tools as you go. I don't recommend you just go and say, hey, I want a track saw just because they look cool, can make cool cuts. Buy tools as you need them. You know, start making what you can right now, make some money off of that and bank that money, save it until you start getting more custom orders. And now all of a sudden you're doing a job where, you know, I need a track saw for this job, or I need a drill press for this job. Now you have that money saved up, and you can start buying those tools as you need them. Don't just start buying them right away, all willy-nilly, because you'll run into something that you need, and then maybe you won't have the money for it when you have a $1,200 tool sitting around that you don't even use. Could have saved your money and bought the tools that you do actually need.